viewers. Mm, Today we will talk about the Industrial Revolution. In the previous lecture, we talked about the Agricultural Revolution in England, its causes, impacts, and course of agricultural revolution. And today's topic is Industrial Revolution. We will talk about Industrial Revolution, causes of Industrial Revolution in England, impacts of uh, Industrial Revolution, uh, where we will cover social, political, economic, and cultural impacts. And then we will talk about the course of the Industrial Revolution. So let's first discuss the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution, the span of Industrial Revolution is about 60 years, which starts from 1760 till 1820. This span in England is known as the era of the Industrial Revolution. So, what was Industrial Revolution basically? Uh, the changes which completely revolutionized the method of production in 18th and 19th century are called Industrial Revolution. Those methods and techniques, those new methods and techniques entirely revolutionized the mechanism of production in England in that age, and then this process is known as Industrial Revolution. So, what kind of production we are talking about? We are talking about the agricultural production. We are talking about the livestock dairy production, and even the general stuffs or materials of daily use also revolutionized, means they were started preparing those stuffs of daily life by new methods and new mechanism. So by production we mean where the techniques were completely revolutionized is known as agricultural revolution. Let's take an example. Earlier, the woolen cloths or even the agriculture sector, where the cottage industry, they were all doing their works by manual methods. Now those manual methods and all those earlier methods, they were completely replaced or revolutionized by new methods of using tractors, using different machines in the wooden sector or in the industrial sector, in as well as in the agriculture sector. So thus the adopting of new method of production is known as agriculture revolution. Uh, as we talked about the span of the industrial revolution, which was almost 60 years, and the main things that emerged in the span of this 60 years or during the industrial revolution were three main systems that emerged. The first one is factory system. The second is big industrial towns, and the third is industrial workers. We will talk about all these three. Factory systems were emerged where they specialized a special zone where the factories were built, and those factories had the means of or the sources of every production, taking from woolen to cloths and all other stuffs of daily use. And secondly, big industrial towns were developed or emerged in this span of agriculture revolution. what were big industrial towns? Big industrial towns were those towns where industries were side by side with the towns developed, because people started migrating from northern and western areas of England, and and got settling in the towns nearby the industries, where they could easily move from their places to the industries, so that they had no issue. And the third is the important segment, or the important part of this industrial revolution, is industry workers. So those people who were earlier attached with cottage industry, those people who were earlier attached with agriculture, now they got associated themselves with the industries, because their means of production and the livelihood was entirely dependent on those industrial parks, or those industries where they could work and earn their daily wages. So this is all about industrial revolution, and then the three important sectors that emerged during the industrial revolution. This video is going to be a bit longer than usuals, because we are trying to cover this entire subject in one go, where it could be read out in a single go, rather breaking it into parts, which might be very helpful for the aspirants. So, coming to the topic, the causes of the industrial revolution. Uh, the first and important cause of the industrial revolution is the increase in the demand of English cloth. Increase in the demand of the English cloth. This was the first cause of the industrial revolution, due to rise in demand of woolen and cotton cloths, right, or cotton cloth. The rich trader always get ready to spin such machine which could spin and weave yarn at full belt. This lead to invention of textile industry also. So how this rise in prices of the English cloths? Those rich traders, which earlier would produce the same amount of cloth, but now due to this wave of change, uh, also change their means of production. Earlier, they could produce only, let's take an example, 5,000 suits. Now, by this revolution, they could produce even 50,000 suits, right? So the rich traders get or got all those spinning machines through which the woolen cloths could be prepared uh, with a greater speed than the earlier one. So this getting of those machines which could produce uh, a greater amount of work as compared to the previous, were got by the rich traders, and they got them sit in their industries. So this the first demand led to the industrial revolution. The second important reason or cause of is the law of navigation. Law of navigation, the English discovered many new routes and established many new colonies. These people got greatly improved their trade. They began to invent new and novel techniques. So, law per navigation means moving from one place to another place by using the sea routes. So, this law of navigation took them to discover new colonies, and those colonies were rich in in natural resources, and they would exploit those natural resources of the colonies and would take them from there to their to the mother country, where this could be processed and to finished products, and those finished products could be brought back to those colonies and sell them. So this love of navigation helped them by discovering new colonies, and by discovering new colonies, the demand of all those products increase, while those new uh, those uh, those things produced in the mother country need to be sell out there in the colonies. So the demand was also increased, and as the demand increased, they try to discover new methods to increase their production. This law of navigation is the second important cause of the industrial revolution. The third is the English Navy. The English Navy was a formidable force of that time. It was such a great army, such a great navy that could defeat any power throughout or across the globe. And they could easily get access to any part of the world while using the sea routes. So they had no fear of attacking by pirates. They had no fear of attacking by the other great power like France, Spain, and thus due to this formidable navy, their production and discovering new colonies paved the way for the industrial revolution. Uh, the fourth important cause of the revolution is the character of the English people. English were adventurous and industrious by nature. This is very common, and their enthusiasm and willpower proved a great cause of bringing in the industrial revolution. Uh, they were determined to toil, and they have willpower. So their character, so they were industrious, they were laborious, they had a willpower that what they could determine they would achieve it by dint of their power, willpower, and by dint of their industriousness, and by dint of their willpower. So this character also paved the way for the industrial revolution. And this fifth important cause is the English colonies. English had colonies across the globe. They had colonies in subcontinent. They had colonies in Africa. They had colonies in uh, North America, and as well as in South America. So they had colonies across the continents, and what they would do with those colonies, they would enrich their resources and would take them to their mother country. And here in the mother country, they would process those resources and would sell them back to those colonies. Thus, they would earn a lot of money, and thus they would produce or they would flourish their industry by using the natural resources of the colonies. So English colonies was another factor in the industrial revolution. And the second important reason which is attached with this colony is the previous topic that we talked about, that they had formidable navy, and by virtue of their formidable navy, they could defeat any power. Uh, sixth important cause is the peace and tranquility. Before this, England remained entangled in wars. They had Hundred-Year War, they had fought Seven Years War, they had fought a Fiume War, they had fought Austro-Succession War, they had war against France. So they had fought, the previous century remained a war century. And as we talked about in the previous lectures, that 18th century was the war of centuries for England. So now in this century, 19th century, we can say, in the last part of the 18th century, peace and tranquility prevailed. And it was the time when Robert Walpole was the prime minister, uh, who is known as the first prime minister of England, whose tenure starts from 1721 to 1744, I think, yes, 42. And due to his policies, he was of the opinion, and he would say that let the sleeping dogs lie. So he was practicing this policy of let the sleeping dogs lie, due to which his nation was saved from unnecessary wars, and which greatly benefited England by securing or safeguarding their economy from the wars while investing in the industrial sector. So the another important reason of industrial revolution, we can say, is the peace and tranquility. The seventh important cause of the industrial revolution is the availability of finance. Trade and commerce greatly soared off because of Walpole's policy of let the sleeping dogs lie. The agrarian revolution is has also added to their income, and thus new technologies were brought in the sector. So they had availability of finance, they had no issue of finance, they had no issue of money, because they had colonies from where they could enrich the resources. Agriculture revolution was already flourished in England, and it had already brought a kind of food safety in England. They could not import the food stuffs from the other powers or from the neighbor countries. So thus the availability of finance was another factor in the industrial revolution. And the eighth important factor or cause of the industrial revolution is favorable climate. The climate of England, being wet, was quite favorable to weaving of cloths, because the thread did not break in such a congenial climate. Cloth was prepared without much difficulty. The climate of England was favorable, therefore, it was unavoidable for industrial revolution. So, how was the climate? The climate was of moderate nature, and was such a congenial nature or conducive nature that where the cloths or the threads through which adding one by one thread and thus making the entire sheet of cloth, so those threads could not break down or could not break in such a conducive environment. So weaving of the cloth or the formation of the cloth was become easy for England. So favorable climate was another factor. So in this sector, in this climate also contributed a lot in the agriculture sector. And this climate also contributed to the production of industrial sectors, because those finished product could not spoil in such a conducive environment. So the favorable climate was an important factor in the industrial revolution. And the ninth cause of the industrial revolution is availability of coal and iron. The English were able to set up factories in England, and due to abundance in iron and coal. Both were easily available at cheap rates or prices. So, coal and iron, which are the two basic important essentials for an industry. Today we see Pakistan is suffering some crisis, uh, whether they are importing coal from the neighbor Afghanistan, whether they are importing other energy rich resources from other countries, which engulf a huge amount of foreign reserves of the state. So, thus, availability of coal and iron was a very important factor um, in paving the way for the industrial revolution. And they could easily set up factories due to availability of these two important essentials for a factory. And the 10th important cause is the availability of cheap labor. With the advent of the agrarian revolution, many petty peasants had been rendered jobless. They were rich people who were ready to work as labor even at cheap rates. So the agrarian revolution had already practiced the people where they could work in fields, and they could work a very laborious kind of work in the fields throughout the day. Now with the industrial revolution, so those farmers which were earlier working in the agricultural revolution, now those people were rendered jobless. Why they were rendered jobless? We will talk about in the coming section that some reforms were brought in the parliament, and which were the important factor of those reforms. Where the in the reforms it was associated that a member must have sufficient amount of land in order to become a member of the parliament. And for becoming a member of the parliament, so those people from the town drifted to the rural areas where they owned a huge land and farmhouses. Thus, those petty farmers, they were rendered, they were kicked out of their fields. So those people come to the cities, and thus they would find the job there in the industries. So the availability of cheap labor, this was the reason that due to this factor, the cheap labor was available in England at that time. And the 11th important cause is the availability of rivers. It was the time when England was not very developed by where they had developed Paka roads, where they had developed the railway tracks and some other means of communication. It was not the time by that time. So those rivers, we are very famous with the very famous river, which is known as River Thames, which also uh, uh, T.S. Eliot and William Butler Yeats also uh, mention in his poems, those famous poems, The Wasteland and The Second Coming. So the availability of rivers which effectively built communication between the cities and between the counties. So this means of communication was used by the industrial revolution, where the resources, where those necessary materials could be brought in easily through using rivers. And another important factor in this is they also built dams on those rivers, so the electricity, generation of electricity was also made possible. And they could easily now get access to cheap uh, electricity. And the second important factor of the river is the transportation. So these 11th causes paved the way for the industrial revolution. Now we will talk about the course of the industrial revolution. Course mean how this become possible into a full-fledged industrial revolution. The first important, surely we know about that, there might have certain inventions, discoveries, which paved the way for industrial revolutions. But now we will talk about those inventions, those courses, which step by step leading to the complete industrial revolution. The first course, if we can say, invention in the textile industry. We will talk about it. In the textile industry, a line shuttle of John Kay, Elying, a line shuttle of John Kay. John Kay invented a line shuttle. What was the purpose of a line shuttle? This was invented in 1733, which could help in the weaving of cloth at a greater speed and with wider width. So the weaving of the clay cloths, it was a process which was, before inventing this machine, was also there. But now with this machine, it speed of the weaving of the cloth. Now they could produce enough amount of cloths in a lesser time. So the inventing of a line shuttle by John Kay was a factor in the course of the industrial revolution. The second is, these are inventions that we are talking about in the textile industry. Then we will talk about the other industries also. The second is spinning jenny of her greasers. Her greasers invented this spinning jenny with the help of which 8 needles could function at a time. So now the work of 8% could be done by a single work. Same is the case with a line shuttle. And water frame of Arkwright. This was another machine with the help of which water power machine would work, and and not with the manual power. A mule of Samuel Crompton, with this machine, fine mule machine, which was run by water power, could be prepared because the thread in it was thin as well as strong. Right, this was another machine. And then power loom of Cartwright. This was another invention in the textile machine. And then dyeing machine, where they would dye the cloth with different colors, and those colors could not wither away in the sun even, or even with the washing. So invention of steam engine, and by steam engine now they could produce any kind of machinery, they could produce or run any kind of machine with this steam engine. And so these were the invention in the textile industry. Now, invention in the art of smelting iron, where, where smelting iron means by burnishing those iron into a modified form which could be used for any purpose. So in 1775, Abraham Darby discovered the use of hard coal in place of soft coke in smelting iron. Uh, open heart method was invented to prepare the steel, right? And then Humphrey Davy invented the safety lamps, and those lamps could be used in mines which could not catch fire. So this was these were the invention in the smelting of iron, and now progress in the method of transport and communication. So these things also helped in the industrial revolution, or played a second role in the industrial revolution. Roads. Macadam, a Scottish engineer, invented the method of building Paka roads with stone pieces. Canals were built which could be used for the transportation, and railways track were laid down, and by 1814 which could be used for transporting materials. Postal service was activated. Telegraph was invented also at that time in 1864, and telephone system in 1817 was also introduced, which greatly encouraged the trade. And then seventhly, the newspaper. Now at that time the Morning Post was published in 1772, and some other magazine later on came, and which greatly helped by keeping aware, abreasting people from the daily happenings. Now we will talk about the effects of the Industrial Revolution, which is the most important part of the Industrial Revolution and this question. And the question, and the examiner can ask a question like, what was Industrial Revolution? What were the causes of the Industrial Revolution? And what were the effects of the Industrial Revolution on England? Effects of the Industrial Revolution. First, we will talk about the social effects of the Industrial Revolution. The first one is, in the social effect, the first one is the disappearance of the small farmers. The small farmers were disappeared. The agricultural peasants, which would earlier work on their fields, now they were disappeared because those places were accommodated to industrial towns. Those places were occupied by the landlords by making industries on those fields. And so, as the agriculture was waning with the passage of time, with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, those peasants and workers, they were rendered jobless. So thus the farmers, they disappeared, and they come to the cities, and got settled there by taking opportunity or availing opportunities in industries. Second is the unsatisfactory condition of the workers. The factory workers had very few facilities with poor wages. They were forced to buy those articles prepared by the industries, and the duration, they would work for 17 to 18 hours a day in a factory, and they would not provide sufficient amount of wages. So the condition of the workers were very miserable at that time. We will talk about in the coming topics the reforms in England and for the workers. uh, lack a proper sanitary system, so they had no proper sanitation. The town or the park where everybody could sit uh, his industry, and there was no such planning for the future. There was no such a farsightedness in a person while making or building an industry or a place. So the sanitary system, they had nothing, and the entire atmosphere was foul and a very bad nature. So it become very poisonous and unhealthy due to the industrial towns. And the seventh is the division of society into two classes. The society was divided into two classes. The first class was the capitalist, and the second is the laborers. So the rich people try to fill their pockets by exploiting the poor laborers, and the poor laborers were exploited by the capitalist or by the feudal lords, landlord, and industrial lords. So this class system was another effects of the industrial revolution. And moral degradation. People fully concentrated toward material world. They were ready to go any extent for the accumulation of the wealth. And the awareness of many brought in their moral degradation and spiritual decadence in the people. So people got more prone to the material world. They had already forgotten about the religion, Christianity, and they had no space for their spirituality, and thus their spirituality or morality was on decline due to materialistic approach, which was uh, gaining momentum day after day. And the second important effects is the economic effect of the industrial revolution. What were the economic effects of the industrial revolution? So the first one is increase in the national wealth. Many cotton and woolen mills, steel plants, and other factories were set up. The things began to produce at full felt, cheap, and in abundance. So thus they would sell out those products produced in England, which become a mean of their source, a mean of their income. So increase in the national wealth. Second is increase in population. The population was increasing day by day due to enough resources. Like the industrial town like Manchester, Lancashire, Sheffield, etc. So people got migrated to those industrial towns, and they got themselves settled there. So thus the population was increasing, because now the improvement in health sector was also gaining momentum. The life expectancy was also increasing. So thus the population was increasing, was the another effect of the industrial revolution, where more labor force could be produced by increased population. Origin of new industrial towns were produced or were appeared, many, like Manchester, and some other new uh, towns, they were built due to the industrial revolution. And temporary employment was another effect, because those work which earlier could be done by the laborers, now it could be done by the machines. Thus temporary unemployment in England. Disappearance of cottage industry. Cottage industry was completely disappeared, because now the things weapons are produced by machine were considered superior to those produced manually. So that this led to the disappearance of the cottage industry. And growth in agriculture, definitely now with the advent of the industrial revolution, new mechanism techniques and new technology came into practice in the fields. Thus, the growth in agricultural production greatly increased due to industrial revolution and improvement in the standard of life. Now, the people in England would wear costly clothes and use costly goods, so their life become more comfortable and luxurious. And now they had money, so they could buy any kind of comfortable product or could live a life of luxury. So the standard of life also increased due to the industrial revolution. And then dependence are put on other countries. Now the industrial revolution had occupied the space of the agricultural revolution. Now those people who were earlier associated with the agriculture, now they turn toward the industries. So thus the agricultural production of England reduced, and England would import agricultural products from the other countries. So thus the dependency on edible oils and other foodstuffs increased due to industrial revolution. Now political effects of the industrial revolution. The first one is need for parliamentary reforms. Many people migrated to northern and western parts of England. So people migrated from one place to another place for the purpose of job seeking or employment. So those people had no right to vote. The middle class, uh, they had become more powerful because the industrial sector was completely occupied by this middle class. Thus, the demand for parliamentary reforms got strengthened. The middle class, which earlier had no right to vote, and now they got strengthened by taking in hand the reins of the industries. Now they got strengthened, and thus the demand for bringing certain reforms got strengthened in the parliament. Need for factory reforms. The industrial revolution introduced the trade union, and when the laborers in England were exploited by rich traders and factory owners, it dawned on them to organize themselves into a union. Uh, the government passed many factory reforms in order to satiate, in order to relieve the traders and the other workers. So the demand for need from factory reforms also got strengthened, and then it also strengthened the national unity. Due to means of communication and transport, people got nearer to each other. The mutual contact between people got strengthened because they had road, railway, telephone, telegraph, post office. So all those means of communication had already strengthened. So the national unity of the country also got strengthened, which primarily the the fruits of the industrial revolution and birth of the Chartist movement. In this Chartist movement is really an important topic, and sometimes they ask for a short note on the Chartist movement. In the coming in the coming days, we will talk about in detail about the Chartist movement, the demands of the Chartist movement, causes of the Chartist movement, and how it become a failed movement, and what was the reason behind the Chartist movement. So it was a moment, uh, uh, it was a moment initiated in England in 1848, yes, 1848, which was primarily a religious moment. Uh, the Chartist movement encouraged the labor to snatch their legitimate rights out of the hands of the cruel factory owners. Because their demands were not fulfilled, the Chartist movement was demanding rights of the laborers. They were demanding the political rights. They were demanding some other civil and political rights, due to which this movement was initiated and getting momentum with the passage of time. This movement was primarily focused on the exploitation of the poor labor class, like the exploitation of those poor people could not be done. So this movement was initiated due to industrial mm, revolution. And the fifth important effect in the political sphere is colonialism. New colonies were carved in different parts of the world to meet the need of their raw materials and to transport them their finished products. So the colonialism was also strengthened due to industrial revolution. And the sixth important effect in the political sphere is uh, it paved the way for future wars. Big countries become rival of one another for the reason occupying colonies of each other or trying to subjugate each other in the commercial sector. So thus the way for future wars also paved due to industrial revolution, which make available all those novel weapons, new weapons, deadliest weapons were also prepared, through which they could part war against each other by taking the resources and minerals of another power. And then political philosophies were also given birth by the industrial revolutions. It was the time when the socialism and communism, these ideas got strengthened, and communism. So these ideas were also got strengthened, and probably this was the time when Karl Marx was also was taking his very uh, 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 primarily it was the time, I think, when he was born. He was born in 18 in this 18 to 10 1810 roundabout, while he was died in 1886, I think, or 83, but I'm not sure. But this was the time where Karl Marx was also breathing. So the political philosophy was also strengthened or given momentum. And the eighth important political effect is the England emerged as a great power, because by that industrial revolution, England made enormous progress in the industrial and commercial fields. So they could defeat Napoleon in 1815. And we will talk about Napoleonic Wars and the French Revolution in the coming part, inshallah, God willing. Uh, uh, England emerged as a great power, and Napoleon, it was the time when he was a formidable foe of England and a formidable force in the entire Europe. Now he was defeated by England in 1815 at Waterloo in 1815. Now we will talk about the last and final effect of the Industrial Revolution, which is the cultural effects of the Industrial Revolution. A steady progress in the field of art and literature. The art and literature was flourished in this meantime because the printing press had already paved the way for the literature. Now, some very renowned writers, novelists like Tom John, mm, uh, mm, the famous novels Clarissa, Pamela, Tom Jones. So those were novels introduced in the 18th century, and the first novel, Clarissa, also introduced in this period of Industrial Revolution. So literature was taking a very steady progress and a giant leap toward flourishing. So literature was introduced, and it was taking the place, prominent place in the lives of some great writers. And the artist made sketches and cartoons of those in those miserable conditions. So now the people could defect those conditions, miserable condition, through their work in the form of making cartoons or sketches, or describing them in words, or in the form of poetry, in the form of novel, like Goldsmith in his poem The Deserted Village talk about the condition, the miserable condition. And then Charles Dickens, who was also the production of this industrial revolution, the Hard Times is very renowned novel of him. The Backward Paper is another novel of him, and he described those miserable conditions of the people living in factories and mines and in other places where they could earn their wages. So the cultural effect of the industrial revolution was great and in degree, because it completely uh, changed the culture of the England from the previous one. This was all about the industrial revolution. We talked about the industrial revolution, the causes of the industrial revolution, and then we talk about the course of the industrial revolution, and then we talk about the effects, which includes the social, political, economic, and culture. So this might be helpful for you in terms of British history and in terms of CSS, IS, PMS, PCS. And if there is any question regarding this topic, you must ask in the comment section. So thank you so much for watching this video. And in the next video, we will talk about another important topic related to British history. So thank you so much.